so much for coming today. I want to thank the Congressman for putting this together. And we'll kick it off to Jim in a moment, but I just wanted to mention a couple things before Jim speaks and then Colonel Lozado of the Army Corps speaks. There's a couple other issues in addition to the Byram River that I know a lot of people are concerned about, which is the flooding coming from Pembroke Park and up towards Weaver Street, and also the dam issue. So briefly, Jim Michael and Amy Seibert are here from DPW. We've been working on lots of things on the Pembroke side of this issue. There's a few things that we think are caused the couple of floods dating back to 2007, and of course during Ida. And so we're looking at those. We put money aside going forward to fix those. There is some concern about the ponds up West Lyon Farm. DPW is in contact with them, and they're looking into that too. So there's multiple things there, but they're looking at all of them. That doesn't get done overnight, but it will get done. So I want to thank them for working diligently on that. Also, the Pembroke Dam, the Byram Dam issue, the Byram River Dam. When I came into office, there was a question. Those dams are supposed to be inspected every 2 years, and the request has to come from the owner of the dam. So when I got into office, I got an email 2 years ago from someone. So I looked up, and it hadn't been inspected since 2012. And so when we called DEEP, the issue of ownership came up. And apparently there's hundreds of dams in Connecticut where there's this issue of ownership. People don't want to claim ownership, and now you know why. It's a very expensive problem to fix. We got a professional title searcher that we found who the owner is. We had a couple of meetings with DEEP, Environmental Protection, and we circled back with them last in October. Today I spoke with someone via email there, and there was still some question on DEEP's part about ownership. So one of our town attorneys, who's pretty certain about ownership, will reach out to them tomorrow. So that is moving forward. We will request that they request an inspection of them. We don't know whether it's in good condition or not, but it will be inspected. So just I know if that's in the back of your mind that we're working on that also. So with that, I will turn it over to Congressman Jim Himes, and thank you, Jim, again for putting this together.
Thank you very much, Fred, and thank you all for coming out tonight. I still have not forgotten. I met some of you, saw some of you shortly after Ida in the Pembroke area there, where the neighborhood experienced, as it has for many, many years, rising water out of the Byram River, and at the same time, and in some cases more violently, water coming down the hill there through the park. Fred and I were there, and as we sort of surveyed all that was happening, first of all, just the images of people with the belongings out on the street and whatnot still stick with me, but we realized that the Byram River is a project that has been underway for a long time. It's something that it's been a known problem for a long time. I'm happy to say that we, for the first time in decades of knowing that is a serious challenge, have a plan. Many of you will have participated in the plan that the Army Corps of Engineers has put together. It involves addressing a bottleneck down at the two bridges that span the river at the post road, and we've got a great team from the Army Corps of Engineers to tell you about why that's the right answer, to take your questions. Other people have different ideas. We've got the engineering and hydrological experts here tonight to talk about that if you would like. That project now is in a phase where what we need is the money, and I'm happy to say that the money is there, largely as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed into law about a month ago, and some emergency appropriations associated with resilience. It's not a done deal, but the project should be ready to start once we get the money committed to that project. That, by the way, the money will be split 50-50 between the federal government and the town of Greenwich. And I know that First Selectman Camillo has been working on that. So I've got a great team from the Army Corps of Engineers to make a presentation about the process that was undertaken to arrive at the conclusion that this is the right solution. I do know that there will be questions about other stuff, including the dam and potentially the Lyons Farms drainage issue. That is not a federal issue. That's not what the Corps does. The Corps has, just so you know, jurisdiction over navigable waterways inland under the law, and as it happens, the Byram River is a navigable waterway, so that's why they're here. But we can talk, if you like, about the the Lions Farm issue, because even though it will be addressed at the state and the local issue, the infrastructure law I referred to actually has pots of money for storm resilience, for municipalities to make the kind of changes that will allow the town of Greenwich to address the flooding that has been such a problem there. So we can talk about that. That element of it will be making sure that those federal funds come in to alleviate some of the costs that the town of Greenwich would otherwise face to address what are municipal drainage issues at the Lions Farms and coming down that hill there. But I really want to be respectful of the Army Corps' time, so I want to introduce you to Colonel Lozado, who has brought a team of people here. He's the commander of the New York region of the Army Corps of Engineers, and he'll walk you through, along with his experts, kind of the process to date, where we are, and obviously be prepared to take any questions you've got about the project. So Colonel, we're delighted to have you here in the town of Greenwich.
Thank you, sir. As the Congressman mentioned, our job is to deal with the navigable waterways. This project specifically clearly deals with that, and we'll have a chance to walk you through it. If there's anything I've learned about being a commander is to turn it over to the experts as soon as possible. But as you all may or may not know, the Corps of Engineers deals with both flood and coastal risk challenges associated with floods and storms. We've been doing that all over New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Throughout this year, you're all very well aware of the challenges that we face from Ida. One important thing to understand with regards to what the Corps of Engineers does is we build projects based on the cost benefit associated with the project that it involves. And these projects will provide mitigation to future storms, but it does not solve all flood challenge problems, okay? So we basically work out an analysis of what is the optimum balance of engineering solution associated with the cost necessary to provide that level of protection. No project will ever mitigate the risk of flooding completely. All right, so that's something to keep in mind, especially when we have Ida recent in our memories and the significant flooding that occurred during that. That was I don't know what it was quite here, but in some areas it was a 1,000-year flood, and that is not something we typically design to. But before we go on, let me turn it over to Karen Baumer. She will give you a quick rundown of where we're at with the project, and then I also have the project PM here, Rafat Salim, who can answer questions as well as Steve Couch, a lead planner. And then I also want to acknowledge, this is kind of a complex project in that it is not just one state involved. We have two states where you got a bridge crossing boundaries. So we've got the New York State DOT that's involved with this, as well as the town of Greenwich and Connecticut as well. So understand the complexity behind this. And with that, Karen, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everybody. All right, so again, my name is Karen. I am the plan formulator on this study, and we'll just jump right in. So as Colonel Lozado was saying, flood risk management is a shared responsibility. No single project or measure could completely eliminate the risk of flooding. Our project, and any flood risk management project, is designed to decrease the risk by either decreasing the severity of floods or the frequency of floods. And it is a shared responsibility for locals, federal, county, state. Everyone plays a part. And those measures, that role ranges from physical measures to non-structural measures to zoning and things of that nature. And so this project that we're going to show you is just really one facet for reducing risk along the Byram River. So what is the Byram River study? It was completed in 2019, and the purpose was to determine if there was a technically feasible, environmentally acceptable, and economically justifiable project to reduce flood risk in the area. We did release a draft report in June of 2018 that detailed our analyses, different measures, the existing conditions, the environmental impacts and did show a tentatively selected plan or a recommended plan that we then refined based off of comments we received from the public, from agencies, from federal agencies, state agencies, all the like, and we did have a final report that can be found on our website, which is we did list the website at the end of our presentation in April 2019. This study did result in a chief's report signed by the chief of engineers in May of 2020. And this recommended plan, which we'll get to in the next slide, did get authorized for construction. But as Colonel Lozado was saying, and the representative, that we do need appropriations to move forward with the next steps. So what is the recommended plan? The recommended plan in that report is removing and replacing the current existing US Route 1 bridges that straddle the Byram River. Our analyses showed that the Route 1 bridges, as they are currently configured with their large central abutments and their low roadway profile, they constrict the river at that point, and that creates a bottleneck. So the river cannot easily convey all of its water underneath the bridges because those abutments catch debris, they catch sediment, they restrict the flow of water. If we remove those bridges and raise them up higher, that water will not create a backup upstream. So a little bit of dredging will take place right in that area to remove the abutments and clear out that part, but no other dredging is recommended. This is a simple configuration or concept drawing of what the US Route 1 bridges could look like. They would be designed to carry the same traffic flow in the same exact location that they currently are. But they would have no central abutment and they would be higher. So that would reduce the risk of flooding. So here, you see the blue line here is the existing 1% storm event floodplain. The yellow line shows what the floodplain extent would do if we removed those bridges. It does decrease, and not only does it decrease the extent, it decreases the level of flooding. So for about a mile or 0.9 miles upstream of those bridges, we would see anywhere from a 1 to 4 foot drop in water surface elevation during a 1% or a 100-year storm, depending on where you are in the floodplain. And this does result in annual benefits that we found to be economically justified to the cost of the project. And these figures are in our final integrated report, which is posted online, with all of the detailed economic and engineering in each hydrologic analysis. So what does this project cost? We are estimating that the project is going to cost about $30 million. This would be cost shared about 50-50, as it is authorized in WRDA 2020, or the Water Resources Development Act. Pre-construction engineering and design, which is where we will be doing more detailed analyses and design for the project, would be $5 million approximately. Right now, the town of Greenwich has committed to being our non-federal sponsor in partnership with the New York State Department of Transportation, because the New York State Department of Transportation does own the bridges, as they are technically in New York State, Port Chester. If you look, there's the line of New York to Connecticut. So what are the next steps? As I said, this project is authorized for construction. But for us to do anything, to study a project, to study an area, to construct a project, to design a project, we need authorization and appropriations. So we do have authorization thanks to WRDA, Water Resources Development Act of 2020, and now we're looking for appropriations. That is out of our control. But we do have, the next steps would be a design agreement, signing a design agreement with our non-federal sponsor and partners to start designing the project. That would take to sign the actual agreement and do the nitty-gritty, it's about 3 months approximately. And then the design period itself will be 1.5 years or 1.5 years. And then we would do another agreement to actually construct the project. As costs change, design changes, whatever may come up, we want to make sure that we're all in agreement with what is going to be moving forward. And then construction would take about 2 years to complete. Now, it's not a full 2 years, but we plan on removing one bridge at a time and having flow go over the Byram River on one bridge, making it a two-way bridge instead of a one-way bridge to keep traffic flowing as much as possible. And of course, the schedule is dependent on when we get appropriations and how we efficiently sign the execution agreements. And that's our project. That is a very brief overview. I'd be happy to answer questions at the end of this, but our full report, additional analyses, and our emails are all on our district website. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess before we go to some questions, I have one right off the bat. I think everybody agrees, elevating the bridges and making them wider will help. But if you look at the map of the river, there are some other choke points there where it's really narrow. If the water's getting holed up there, it will still prevent it from getting down, and those areas would still flood. Is there any? Are you looking at those areas there to widen that a little bit, as we're doing on the post road?
So there are a few other bridges upstream of the Byram River, the US Route 1 bridges that we did look at and consider. They do act as a little bit of a constriction, but we found that the US Route 1 bridges were the major constriction and were the only project that would be economically justified in that area.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, what I was referring to was a little bit more down into Greenwich. And there's some areas there where it's really, really, really narrow. And my only concern as a non-engineer is, if that is not widened at all, is this project going to do anything at all if it's being bottled up right at those choke points there? I don't know if you have a map there, if you could see, but certainly at certain points, there are certain points where it really gets narrow in the Byram River in the Pembroke area, between Riverdale, Caroline, and into Pembroke. And that has gotten a little bit, thank you, Carl.
And so we did consider dredging that part of the river. However, to make it, when we look at a project, it needs to be economically justified for us to be able to recommend it. Because of the densely populated area that this is, the real estate acquisition costs alone would be extraordinarily high. The current project, as of right now, only has a VCR of 1.1, which means it's barely economically justified. So that would definitely be a cause of concern. And we did look at dredging that part of the river. However, we found that it does not have enough capacity to allow the water to flow under the bridges. There's just not enough storage in that area. If we were to do that and dredge that area, it would need to be combined with either a flood wall or a levee to really get a decrease in water surface elevation to realize benefits. And that just increases the cost also tremendously. And so it was not economically justified. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Questions? Sir.
Yes, in addition to your point about sediment narrowing down there, the two ponds out there have been collecting sediment for decades. And it's getting shallower and shallower. And when the water goes down, you can see how big an island is forming in front of those ponds. That needs to be dredged, or that's That's worse than narrowing, because you're just piling up stuff in there that's so shallow that it'll spread out like that.
You're talking down at the Byram River towards
Caroline Pond and the one above it.
Yeah, I know Pat Sesto's not here, Environmental Affairs Director. In the past, it has been brought up all around about doing some dredging, but just not as high on that as it's not a long-term solution. I know we have done some dredging. We recently did some in Binney Park, but we also did some other mitigation efforts that we didn't do, I think, 25 years ago. That should help it, but certainly I understand your...
Well, I think those ponds were created when they built the Byram, because they dredged out, they got a lot of aggregate out there, and that's what caused those ponds. So that has lasted for almost 100 years. That's permanent enough for a lot of us out there. That needs to be dredged. It's getting, if you come down there sometime, the water's low, you'll be shocked.
No, I've seen it. Thank you, appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Did I see that the design schedule was 5 years?
Yeah, they put 2 years there, but I don't think it'll be as long. Yes?
When you say it's going to affect the water level to certain mileage, 1 mile, I think you said above those bridges, where is that? Where is that? Is it on Riversville? Where is that?
I believe it is, off the top of my head,
It's up to Howard Drive.
Basically goes to Howard.
right where the existing levees are.
So right at the top of Caroline.
So, Bailiwick, the little Bailiwick Bridge, is also very low. And in this last 1,000 years, which is not too long after the last 100-year flood, that got really stopped up, and then there was a lot of widening. The water went to all sides. It's not that it flooded property around there, but this is not going to have any effect up there. At the Bailiwick level?
Do you want to know about the Bailiwick Bridge?
Yeah, so the Bailiwick Bridge, that is at the extent of this project, and when we looked at that, it actually is outside of this project. So the benefits of this project, because of the number of dams that are in between there, it will not have an impact on that bridge. When we recently redid that bridge, we looked at making modifications to improve that. In order to raise that bridge to meet the 1% storm requirements, we would have had to raise that bridge 8 feet. And with the distance it has between there and Riversville Road, it was physically not possible. So, because we would have had to raise Riversville Road 8 feet, and there's property owners and so forth along there. So we looked at that, and when we do those studies and so forth, we have to justify whether or not it's, kind of that economically feasible situation as well for that. And it becomes, with there being multiple access points into that subdivision, we saw that there was an alternative access point, so that's why we proceeded with the bridge design the way we did.
So can I also ask, these 2 floods have made major inroads into the property, the waterfront along there, and I'm told that we can't repair the waterfront where it's done. Is
We're
that
told they
correct?
can't repair the waterfront, the damage caused
We
by
can't, because the river has to go where it wants to go, is what?
So there can be some modifications to the waterfront. We just have to look at what those are and make sure they're properly permitted. So, we'd be happy to, set you, if you'd like to contact me. For those that don't know, I'm Jim Michael. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Public Works for the town. So I'm in Town Hall. You can contact us. You can contact Pat Sesto, who's Director of Environmental Affairs. She's happy to help work with that because she's the first permit that has to be talked about through that. So working with her is a good place for that.
Thank you.
Right. You showed us generally where the 0.9 or 1 mile area is from the impact of the project. Can you point out on the map where the gauge is, the river gauge, what the U.S. Geological Survey?
So the river gauge that is, the USGS published is, that's right on the Conley Avenue Bridge. So that's a little further up.
Can you point it there and make that in reference to how far that is from the area of this project? Because it was clear in looking at what happened with that bridge, with the flood, high tide was at 11:30 at night, and boom, high tide hit, and that's when everything in the area flooded in the lower part. So clearly there is that issue, but that's also where the gauge hit. So it's roughly at the same mile marker that you're telling me, or gauge, or?
It's probably the gauge that we gauge versus the 1 mile distance that we were talking about is approximately, probably about a half mile upstream of that, something like that.
The gauge is higher up, okay.
It's further up, yes, further up the river.
Thank you. Let me get it clear. Let me just jump in, Fred. I just want to clarify a question that the gentleman asked about dredging. You heard the answer from the Corps in terms of they're looking at it and stuff, but as long as we have the Corps here, I want to ask them a question, which is, when we dredged the Mianus River, which is a federal waterway, because the town paid for it, the process was much accelerated. We just needed Army Corps approval, again, because it's a federal waterway, a federal channel. If, for whatever reason down the road, subsequent to this project, the decision was taken by the town to dredge those ponds, would the situation be the same, where so long as the town of Greenwich paid for it, it would be simply a process of getting Corps approval?
Right, so getting a Corps permit to do that work.
Okay, that's just important because the actual work that we're talking about here to rebuild the bridge has a whole congressional authorization and appropriations process. So that was actually kind of the answer I was hoping for, which is it would just require approval if we chose to pay for it.
Yeah, a follow-up question on that. When you talk about dredging those, that is contained in the study area from your 2018 presentation. When you look at economic feasibility of that, there is no land acquisition needed. It's just pure dredging, because it's all right next to the roadway there, and there's no cost associated with that. So I would assume that this does not have the economic issues of the lower Byram River issue, which talked about property acquisitions. Is that correct? That's directed to the Army Corps.
Yeah, I was confused about that too. I think the gentleman has a point, which is you referenced property acquisition, but he was asking about pure dredging. Now, having been through a couple of dredgings, I will tell you it's not free, meaning that the disposal and everything else is actually quite expensive, but I was confused by that too.
Yeah, no. We did look at dredging by itself, but we determined, based off of our hydrologic and hydraulic analyses, that it would not lower the water surface elevation enough to give us economic benefits. Because how we determine economic benefits is by a reduction in damage to structures. And so if it doesn't remove structures from the floodplain or enough structures from the floodplain, it is determined not to be economically justified.
And that was for the ponds as well, not just the stream?
I am not positive. I think in previous feasibility studies in 1977, we did look at dredging the ponds. I'm not sure.
I didn't see it in the report.
I don't believe we did look at dredging the ponds. Just the channel.
I have a question. So if the ponds are shallow and that narrow strait is shallow, and we get a lot of rain, it doesn't take very long for all that to just blow up. On the flip side, I understand if you dredge it, it fills up, it levels off. So it's like, you're kind of back in square one. But where I'm going with this is, there's that narrow strait that the whole, I don't know, you did the numbers and it's not worth it to do it. But time and time again, this happens and those homes get trashed. Because before it gets to that bridge, it's probably 3 feet deep or 10 feet wide. The pond is 5 feet deep. So it's very deceiving in a sense. That's why my concern is if there was, I don't know if you want to call it dredging, but if they took that narrow strait and maybe, again, this is not my job, but dredge it and put in maybe concrete base and walls so that the water flows and you don't have sediment building up, at least there's a steady width and depth that's going to carry a certain amount of water flow. But right now, it's vegetation growing over it. It's very shallow, and I could walk over it. So.
One factor that must be considered in all of this The Byram is tidally influenced. So if there's rain and it's being stopped by the storm surge coming up, that water still has nowhere to go, and you need enough storage to contain.
But we don't always have a tidal issue. So sometimes we may have a heavy rain and it's not high tide, therefore the water will flow more freely. So we can't say that all the time. So again, it's all about minimizing, right?
Right.
So again, we have tide storms and then we have storms where there's no tide. So the point I'm getting at is, which is it? So I'm getting it, it's again, minimizing. This isn't gonna make everything perfect. We know that.
And I think what Real summarized, Carl, if you're, correct me if I'm wrong, what Carl is saying is if it doesn't replacing the bridges and widening it is a great step, but if the water's being dammed up before that, is it really making it even worth the project and spending $30 million if there's another issue right in front of that? Now, that would require, that is private property on both sides. So that opens up another question, because people are usually hesitant to give up private property. But maybe in this case, I don't know if they've recently been contacted, but that may be something we could look into fairly shortly.
But again, it's maintaining that narrow strip to some degree, because it's getting overgrown, it's getting more shallow. And again, I'll point out this scenario where there is no high tide. It's just a lot of rain, and that thing gets shallower and shallower, and the water rises quicker and quicker. Even if there's no high tide, again, and it's a heavy rain. Worst storm is there's a high tide and well, yeah, then we're all.
I mean, I share the same concern as you. It's the private property thing there. So if you have somebody that owns that and they're not cooperating.
Yeah, but can they keep it clean? I'm saying, can we keep it?
As you know, we run into this with a lot of people, so that's why we have things like blight ordinances now and things like that. But thank you. Yes, sir.
Phil Catalano.
Hey, Phil. I recognize you.
We have a little different issue where the water coming downstream from that bridge at a low tide, which actually this year, after 90 years, destroyed our whole marina. So again, where the pond is filled in, all the Byram River, low tide, we have no water. So actually that raging water coming down now is like rapids, which tore all of our ramps right off the seawall, our bulkhead. All the docks went down the river. We weren't expecting this. For 90 years, we've always tied things and cabled things, but this was, again, one that got the best of our family business. With the bridge there, is that going to cause more volume of water coming downstream for anyone on the Byram River, we'll say south of the Post Road? Because there's no water right now. Our boat slips, we can't even rent any because there's probably 2 feet of water at mean low tide. So is that going to cause more problem downstream?
So as part of the project, when all the engineers, both from the Corps and from the town that were working on this project, looked at that, one of the key points that we try to make is we can't have a negative impact downstream. And so what we need to remember is the water that's coming down the Byram River is going either underneath these Route 1 bridges or over top of these Route 1 bridges. And by making the modifications that are going to be that are proposed by this project, it allows the same water to go downstream. It's just going underneath the bridge rather than over top and underneath the bridge. So that Route 1 is more passable by traffic, but the volume and so forth of water that's coming towards where your properties are is not going to increase.
Peter.
Thank you all for all your interest in my favorite river. It took me 73 years to realize that it's tidal all the way up to where the Army Corps reacted to the 1950s dredging. And I think if we do it strategically, we have to remember that we have 7 to 8 foot tidal change twice a day. So in that narrow slot at the bottom of the, some people call it Caroline Pond, I like to call it Pembroke Bay since it is tidal. But fresh water is lighter than salt water. So it will flow above, and it'll actually, 22 hours a day, it'll help everyone, including my favorite Catalanos, marinas. Anyway, thank you for all your interest. Let's keep working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. I know Sandy, there was a survey done. I just wanted to know from a project plan, what's the difference between Sandy and Ida in the sense of the project plan, previous assessment to now?
Was the question, what is the difference between? Yeah.
So I think you're getting at the bigger question of how the government responded to Sandy versus the response to Ida.
No, actually, I took a look at it, and there was more, I think the work was done more upstream, but now I'm looking at this particular project, and it's now focused.
It's a separate countywide study.
I think what you're referring to, I think Sandy was a coastal event, and the flooding was more from the Long Island Sound, so it was a tidal influence, and Ida was a fluvial event, so the flooding was due to excessive rain occurrence in a short period of time. Is that the question? These are the different flooding mechanisms, Sandy versus Ida?
It was strictly the Byram River, and all the details in the plan to see, to fix, and to address. But it was more upstream in regards to the dam. Peter, you keep me honest, is there anything, we had this discussion in regards to what you had, any chance, do you remember? I'll get your information, but I was just looking at the plan, there's a lot to do with upstream and what we can do to prevent. But now that I'm seeing the plan now, it's a lot more downstream by the bridges. That's the question.
Sir.
Okay, I live right next to the river, many years. Sandy was a tidal event caused by tidal. We had hardly any rain in Sandy. The water from the sound came back up the river and raised the river about 2 feet. Hardly at all compared to Ida. Ida was a significant rain event, causing the river to go up as high as April of 2007. Okay, so that's exactly what happened. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Question about the cost share. Does Reddington pay the whole 50%, or does the New York State Department of Transportation pay part of it? Because basically the town is buying 2 new bridges to New York State.
Yeah, it's the 50% federal's more question.
Well, it's the 50% that Reddington's paying, that's what I'm concerned
But
about.
it is the non-federal 50%. Is Greenwich sharing that with the New York State?
So,
Yeah, okay.
so currently the way in the project, the original project, the feasibility study was shared 50-50 between the town of Greenwich and the Army Corps of Engineers. Moving forward, because we found the solution being the Route 1 bridges, we've had initial conversations with New York State, and there is been positive feedback from New York State that there's going to be cooperation on sharing that funding of that 50%. Exactly what those numbers are is still to be determined, but we've had those conversations, and there is definitely a commitment to work with the town. Because yes, the benefit for the physical structures of the bridges are New York State's bridges, but the physical benefits of the flooding impacts are more the town of Greenwich residents. So that's where we look to share that 50% of the local share.
What are you aiming at? Like a third by New York State and 2/3 by town of Greenwich?
That to be continued. I don't know, but I know that non-federal 50% we are working on. And thanks. So Jim's working hard on getting that.
So that just started, basically, that negotiation with New York State.
Yeah,
Those negotiations have been going, they've been very abreast of this project for multiple years, and we've had multiple conversations until such time as there's a firm project with appropriation those conversations haven't hit the final pathway.
And the line in the authorization budget that funds this at the federal level was co-sponsored by me on this side of the river and by Mondaire Jones, who is Nita Lowy's successor, the representative. So in virtue of his participation in putting that amended line, New York understands that they're on the hook for something, even if we don't know what the percentage is today.
So can you help us, can you help the town of French at your level?
It's ultimately a state-on-state negotiation, but yes is the answer to your question. And if New York were taking the position that it's all Greenwich, they would not have had Mondaire Jones co-sponsor the authorization language for the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Andrea Holm. I live in the area of the river where the original Army Corps of Engineer work had been done years ago. And I was involved in all of your meetings from 16? I don't know, we're missing a couple of years in there, but I went to all the meetings. And so I understand that, this is a great plan for us because we have the cooperation between Connecticut and New York. So it's definitely a benefit to us on our side of the border. But I just want to know, have we taken a look, and this is sort of what I'm gathering from people saying, and I'm feeling the same, even since this last storm. I mean, Caroline Pond is filled with silt. I mean, the banks have come in, there's garbage, and I understand that the dredging is something that we can look at moving down the road, but it's something that has to be done. Yeah. It's so different from what it was when you saw it in 2016. It's a completely different landscape at this point, especially after this last storm. I really think that some other things need to be looked at. And I do know that during the last meetings that we had before this was finalized, there were 3 or 4 different presentations put forward. I can't remember, maybe it was 3 ideas, and then people voted on them, and they looked at what was the most cost-effective, what the feasibility was, and this was the chosen plan because according to the numbers, it just kind of worked out. But now we're saying we have more money, and we have more things that we can do. Like, are we looking at that? Are we looking at putting, now that we have the resources, that was one of our biggest issues, we didn't have the resources. Now we have access to that. Can we expand this a little bit more?
We don't have the resources. It's not like we have more money to, it still needs to be economically justified. And so, like you said, when we were showing other alternatives that were considered, they were not economically justified. Just because some people are saying, oh, we have the money to do this, doesn't mean that we can spend federal dollars on something that's not economically justified, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
Well, I'm just saying, I think we chose the easiest route instead of, there were other options as well. Yes, there were walls that could be put up, there was dredging was talked about, there were other things that could have been done. I can't remember what the other 3 plans were. And I know this was the one that initially came forward, that finally ended up coming forward. But even if you're talking about requiring homes, I remember looking at that map, and it was like 1 house. That house has been flooded 3 times since then, and I think it's on the market right now. So, that's something just to keep in mind as well.
When you say feasibly,
Let me take a quick, Carl, let me just take a quick whack at that. So, I won't address the individual house. Maybe somebody on the Army Corps team knows more about that. But, so their decisions are pretty formula-based, meaning they go to the point where it just doesn't make economic sense because they've evaluated the cost of acquiring a property. So they're pretty formula-based. The reason I wanted to get the clarification for the other gentleman's question was that when the bridge is rebuilt and we have the experience of seeing how weather events behave with 2 new bridges, the town were to decide, as it did with the Mianus River channel, that, well, regardless of what the Corps' calculus is, we still want to do that. We could do that without the lengthy legal process that this required, but it would be on us in terms of dollars.
Just with their approval.
I don't, does the house ring a bell? I don't know.
There was a map that, there were those little X's on it, which houses would have to be acquired, which people would have to put, you could raise your house. But I think that was the one thing. One of the options was basically most of the onus went on the homeowners. It was our responsibility to either raise our houses, or to put floodgates, or to put windows in our homes that, stop the flooding to come in. And it was a lot of things that basically we had to pay for. I don't even know that there were low income, like low interest loans offered to us or anything like that. So just something, something that moving forward we should keep in mind as a town.
I'll try to be brief. Much as I'm not known. So we're kind of like sandwiched between two things here. We got the river, we got West Lyons Farm. That development was done in the 70s. We have a drain that goes under the park of Caroline's Pond. That was probably put in the 1930s. It was made to handle a certain amount of water before any of the developing went on there. Now we got all the developing. There's much more water and runoff. I don't need to get into the technicalities. It's just the nature of the beast. We have a drain that's not capable of handling that much more runoff than when it was farmland up there. That's number one. We got an improper fair share. We got water that's filling up in ponds that are 3 feet deep. I mean, I don't get it. I just, like, some of these things are just so clear. It's like, I think we need to, like, one of the terms to you mentioned is like, I get answers like the Ida when it rained. A large majority of the homes in my area got flooded from the water from the park, from the drain that was built in 1930, not to made to handle water and developments that happened up there. Yeah, and then they're being told that, well, the owner should build their houses up. Well, why don't we bring the drain up to code and make it larger to handle a bigger capacity of water? Make it the same height of the drain that it is now. Just go wider. If you go look under Deep Gorge, there's this huge drain that, like, water had to be made probably in the last 5 or 10 years. I don't know. It looks brand new to me. And water's feeding that from East Lyons Farm. I'm only finding out. I thought it was just West Lyons Farm was doing the drain going under the park. It's coming from East Lyons Farm, West Lyons Farm, other developments. So the point is, we got a shallow pond, we got a straw to take on water that was put in when they had farms up there. Like, some of the stuff is just so obvious. And then West Lyons Farm wanted to keep their water levels high because they had some bird there, so they, that was a request. On top of the fact they got retention and detention ponds. A detention pond is to get water and then get rid of it the next day or 2 or 3. And retention ponds, which holds water to a certain height. They're not all supposed to be full. So we got full ponds galore. It looks beautiful. We got a straw that was made in 1910, and we got shallow ponds. Can't we figure something out here, guys?
Second time in a row we got flooded by
I don't understand.
What did you do after 2007? Nothing.
Actually, I think it's 3 times.
Sorry.
Thank you. Jim,
Yes.
can address some of those things.
So, tonight we're not necessarily here to give you all the details on that because we're still in the process of reviewing all of that detailed information. We're analyzing all of that. We've studied it in the past. We've got some potential solutions. What we also need to remember is one of the things that Congressman mentioned earlier on is that, this storm was a large storm. No matter what we design for, we can improve the situation. We're not going to completely prevent the situation.
Minimize damage.
So we're going to be making a project. We have a project put together so far. We're in the conceptual design stages. We're analyzing that. We're looking to get back out to the public probably in the spring timeframe to talk about that project and what we can do with that and move that project forward. So,
thank you, Jim. Sir.
Just drain those ponds. That's the solution. Simple as that. Dredge the pond. The pond's supposed to be filled in the storm. When the drought is full already, where the water's gonna go? To my house. Dredge the ponds. Keep them empty.
We got the West Line.
No. Yes.
It's not Caroline's pond.
Both.
Caroline's pond.
Both.
It's a
Both.
mess. It's a mess.
All right, we have to acknowledge one person at a time. We can't talk at the same time. Sir.
Sir,
in
in 2007, we got flooded by the water running from the Lyons Farm. What did you do since then?
Nothing.
What did you do?
Okay.
Nothing. This happened for the second time, and you're still looking me in the eye like nothing happened?
Well, 2007, it happened twice.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that was all over town. I got flooded out twice too. I mean, it happened, but as you heard, Jim has mentioned twice now,
that they are looking into all that. Carl was nice enough more than a few times.
I understand,
to do
sir,
that.
but
So,
this happened in
what I'm saying is,
2007. What was happening?
Jim is, well, we're here right now, it's 2021. I wasn't in office in 2007, I obviously lived here, but I was not in office.
These guys were.
No, they were not. No, they were not.
They're working here for like 20 years already, and they know about this
Jim was
problem.
not in office in 2007, and Jim Michael was not, were you in 70?
I didn't start with the town until 2011.
All right, so what I'm saying is we're
But
here
you,
now.
but you all know about this problem, right?
They are, as they said, again, and they are working on this right now. They are, Carl and others have given a lot of questions, and all of them I think are very legitimate. And some of the things you have said, very legitimate, they are working it. It's not going to be settled tonight, tomorrow, next week, but it's going to take time. But this is all over town. And it's every town. I'm talking with mayors and first selectmen all over Fairfield County. They all have the same thing. Infrastructure problems. Infrastructure that was built 80, 90, 100 years ago. It's not equipped for all the development that's happened. So it's a bigger picture, but we do think in Pemberwick and Byram, there are some fixes there that we can do, and thanks to what Jim's doing on the federal level, it's a two-pronged solution, but we're working at it, and certainly all of those things, whatever happened in 2007 and non-action or action, okay, we can't address that. We're just addressing right now what we can do to make sure we can mitigate it as much as we can, because your house is your biggest investment you're ever going to make.
Sir, with all due respect, that's what I heard in 2007 from the previous.
Okay, I can't speak to that. I don't know who, again, that was a different person, but we're meeting weekly on this now. I can't tell you how many neighborhoods, each week, all around Greenwich. And people are equally upset. And again, I'm born and raised here, I've been flooded out 5 times in my life. 5 times. So I get it. I'm not just sitting here throwing excuses at you. I've been flooded out 5 times in 2 different places. Sir.
First of all, thank you, Fred. Thank you, Jim. Jim, is New York State here?
Yes.
Is there a representative? Okay.
New York State DOT is up here.
All right. So, $30 million to redo some bridges sounds great, but 35. If you don't know the turnaround, the Exxon is in Connecticut, right? And the Carvel is in New York. Have they looked at traffic? The DOT from New York State, have we looked at the traffic and the amount of construction that is going on in Portchester and Greenwich, from the mill all the way down to where the old United Hospital was in Portchester, is all getting redesigned and reconstructed. I don't even believe that the bridges we're about to spend $35 million on will handle the traffic in a few years. Health and safety concern, there's people trapped in their homes, fire departments, police. I don't know how you're going to handle that in a decade. And I think it should be looked at. She mentioned levies. 30 million is going to be nothing. 35 million is going to be nothing when no one can live along that river.
And your points are well taken. I think that was some of the concern about spending 35 million, which we want and need done. But addressing some of those other issues downstream that may, unfortunately, mitigate the positive effects if we can't figure that out. So I mean,
Portchester's trying to redo their whole downtown,
and
they were impacted by flooding. But from where we live on this Byram River, if we don't do the dredging that people are talking about on those ponds, as well as address the bottleneck down there, it's going to continue to happen, there's no doubt.
Sounds like you asked an interesting question that at least I don't think any of us have the answer to, which is what's the municipality of Portchester done with respect to traffic studies associated with a lot of new development? I don't think any of us have that right now. None of us are New York, but I think we can get it to you. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but for New York, you want to give us a minute or two on what that process is?
You can't even get around the turnaround the way it is.
Yeah,
it's the middle of the day.
I hear you, but I'm a Connecticut federal representative, so I'm the wrong guy to make that case to. There is a right guy to make that case to. I'm trying to find out who that might be.
I had a follow-up question about the dams of the river. Okay? So that's my secondary concern.
But before we go on, I will ask your question, but I'm going to ask my staff to make a note that we will. So don't leave without giving us your contacts. we'll find out the right person in Portchester who would be in charge of traffic studies associated with redevelopment.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Portchester, New York State, the federal, I don't even know who owns US Water around here, but if it's New York State, then yeah.
Just make sure we have your contact so we can get that to you.
Okay. The follow-up question is on these dams, right, that go from behind Holly Home Avenue up to where the new development around the mill, whatever they call it now, the mill, that other dam. Who owns the dams, Fred, and who's maintaining them?
So there's a couple dams there. So when I reached out to a couple, we had some preliminary work before I asked the professional title searcher to do it. And one condominium complex reached out to me and said, we own it. Turned out they were thinking of the wrong one. So the one, I'm going to say it wrong, it was River Run owns the one, I believe, up where the mill is. The one where Byram, which is everyone next to 200 Pembroke Road, which is the one everybody's concerned about, which is the one that has been inspected since 2012. We did our search and found who owned it, and today I said, as I mentioned earlier, I reached out to Deep because our town attorney said they hadn't heard back yet from our conversation with them about 6 weeks ago, and the person who I spoke with, Chuck Lee, said they can't confirm what our title searcher said, so our town attorney's reaching out tomorrow to them with confirmation so the letter can go out. I thought the letter had been going out, that's why I reached out to them today, to request the inspection. Now, if they refuse to inspect it, we'll order it and we'll assess them later on, but we have to get it done. It has to be inspected. Yes?
So you can force them into fixing that, because I don't think it's in very good shape from what I've heard.
Yeah,
I don't want to go there, because it'll break us all.
I mean, I've heard so many things, and I've even heard from the
I'd rather
president.
not take the chance. I'll move.
I agree with you. And then one engineer told me, look, it's fine, but I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Yeah.
So that's why we ordered this
If
study.
it's not safe, you can force him to fix it.
Yeah, well, you can't sit there and wait, you can't sit there and wait for a disaster, and then the worst thing you can do is say, well, you have one government entity pointing the finger at the other one. It doesn't help you if the thing ever collapses, God forbid. So that's why we want to get that taken care of and inspected right away. And if we've had these conversations with our town attorney, if there is God forbid, something that's really effective there, and say like what happened in Florida, where that condominium association knew about it, it was such a big bill, they didn't want to fix it, and the thing sunk, it collapsed. So we'll get it done. And if you have to, you worry about the later on, but we'll make sure whether it's us or the owner, how we assess them. But it may not even be that bad, but we'll get it.
Is that correct?
The 1800s.
What's way to wood?
Some of the parts of the thing.
Right. I've not heard that, but I might say. Okay.
I hope not.
But the Army Corps, we'll take care of it. Yes?
Okay, my family's lived here for a long time. My grandfather has been to all these meetings about the river, dredging the river, the Army Corps, and it's all the talk about the same thing. Well, this Ida hit us pretty bad. I have bedrooms downstairs in a furnished basement. My daughter and my grandchildren lost everything. And everybody is worried about doing this and doing that. You need to dredge that. You need to dredge the river. Because when I was a kid, there was so much water in there, you could take a boat out on there. You could have thick ice to go ice skating. Now it's all filled with silt. That was what was in my house. That was in my house last time. And that made everybody sick.
You are correct. Growing up swimming in the Landers River, I paddled there 2 years ago, down towards Palmer Hill, where it used to be 5, 6, 7, 8 feet.
Yes, but you gotta get rid of that.
It's not that easy. That's not an easy thing. We have to not to get off this topic because this will take a long time. But the Landers River was a little bit different. Some of these things, and even like Mill Pond has never been dredged, and lots of things.
29 square miles, 12,000 acres of watershed going through literally 10 feet.
Yeah. So that's what the concern is, where it really gets narrow there, where it's private property. That's a major concern. But since we want to be respectful of the Army Corps' time. You want to do 2 more questions? Yes, sir.
And let me just say, I've been in the neighborhood and listening to people. I don't blame anybody. Fred and I are relatively recent in office. I don't blame anybody for being immensely frustrated, because I hear story after story after story about how 50, 60 years, nobody should celebrate until this is done, but what we just went through today with a study and a plan has never been done. So we're not done, but we're a lot further along than we ever have been, and if things go well, sometime in the next 3 years, we're going to have what I hope to be, and what the hydrologists are telling us is going to be a big change. Is it going to fix everything? Probably not. But anyway, I understand the frustration, I really do, because I've heard story after story just like yours. But we understand that we are a lot further along than we have been in generations, and I think we're a couple of years from actually getting something big done. Gentleman over here.
I apologize for coming in late. I missed the whole presentation. But to follow up on the gentleman's questions regarding the bridges in terms of improvement of the traffic situation there, I understand and I appreciate that you're going to ask your staff to send information about traffic studies that the DOT, Connecticut, New York DOT, and maybe Portchester has done. But what's the next step? Has this project, this tremendously expensive project to raise the bridges, has it considered the traffic situation at all? And if it hasn't, why not? And will it going forward?
Great question. This is a flood risk management study. So we are recommending a flood risk management project. However, this project has been authorized for construction with a $30 million price tag to be shared 50-50. If the non-federal sponsor wants to completely change the configuration of the bridge, so to make it a 4-lane bridge instead of a 2-lane bridge, they can do that, but they would foot the bill. We are committing to $15 million. If they want to build a $60,000 bridge, they would have to pay $60,000 minus the $15,000 millions of dollar bridges that we are recommending. So we are doing a flood risk management project, but if you guys want to do a betterment, that's on you.
You ask a really good question, and I think it started over here, that I will give it back to the experts. We have 2 different municipalities, 2 different states, and an organization that is very, very good at what they do, but it's not traffic. So I don't have a good answer for you right now, but I'm going to get one, because it is very possible that given the different jurisdictions and given the different expertise, that these guys have proposed a bridge that is not going to be sufficient to handle a whole bunch of new traffic. Now, I have no idea if there's going to be a whole bunch of new traffic, but it could fall through the cracks. So in addition to getting this gentleman an answer about who did those studies, we need to find out what New York State and what Portchester has done with respect to whether all this redevelopment in Portchester is likely to significantly increase the traffic. Because it would be a tragedy to rely simply on the Corps of Engineers who care about flooding, and it turns out we had an opportunity to build a bigger bridge that we've realized 10 years down the road we need. So in addition to getting answers about who's responsible, I'm going to actually look, and I'm sure Fred will be interested in looking at whatever the traffic projections are around that redevelopment, because even if it's more money, we'd be really foolish not to build the bridge that doesn't just satisfy flooding, but that satisfies the future of traffic.
Those of us who have been involved in this for a long time, and have lived here for a long time, realize this has been going on for quite a while. The traffic whether it increases or not, it's already bad. The situation's already bad. It's unsafe. There's been studies. The Route 1 corridor study was done. Recommendations were done for roundabouts and things like that. And it died because, it's not feasible or something like that. So it's just a shame that we're going to be doing 2 bridges and going to consider what's already a bad situation, not what's going to be in the future to be even worse.
No, I really appreciate you highlighting, and there's even more risk because both of the bridges, I believe, are physically located in New York State, correct? So both of those bridges are physically located in New York State. So it's quite possible, probable even, that the state of Connecticut may not have jurisdiction to say, we want this kind of bridge. New York Department of Transportation may be legally able to say, we don't care what you want. So anyway, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I hadn't sort of thought the extent to which that needs to be layered in.
Yeah, and Danny's right. I mean, a lot of the proposals that are going on in Portchester right now, if half of them go through, you're going to have a lot more traffic there. If just half of them go through. So, you know, where I was meeting with Mayor Filanco, he's not in office anymore on a monthly basis. The new mayor is not around as much, but certainly I'm going to reach out to him again, and certainly maybe George Latimer, county executive, since you know they do have county government in Westchester, in New York. So that may be another option there too, because it just doesn't have to be Greenwich footing the bill if we did want to make a bigger bridge to accommodate any possible, you know, increase in traffic. Do one more?
Yeah, one question I had was, one of the other RTM District 9 reps who couldn't be here tonight, wanted to be, emailed in a specific question. We all know this is going to cost a ton of money somehow, somewhere. How much can we look to see is going to be requested by you in the first selectmen's budget, either for capital or operating for 22-23?
Yeah, we're doing the capital now. It's you know, we're looking at a lot of different things, and so as you know, I don't have the final say on that one, but we're doing that right now. So, any other questions? One last one. Yes.
I just have a question about Elmwood Park. I'm right across the street, and that was horrendous. I mean, it was unbelievable. What is going to be done about the park area itself with the pipe that runs under Rex Street?
I mean, there's so many, we've been going back over this, there's a bunch of different things. I'll let the engineer say, but we're looking at several, including the trash rack, drains along the river, piping.
Right, so at this point, we're looking at options. Well, there's been recommendations in the past to increase the size of that. Those recommendations came out in 2011 or so, and since that time, we've increased the amount of rainfall design data that we've looked at. So we're re-looking at all the different options. We're looking to see, is there increases in the pipe size? Is there some sort of upstream storage piece? Is there a diversion culvert of some sort that we could send it to? We're looking at all different options, and that's what we're trying to explore and get to a point where we can come to you with a more definitive answer so that we're not standing here without knowing all the different options, and present to you a few of these options as to what would the community like. So.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Okay.
I'll let you have the last word, but I want to say a big thank you to the Army Corps and the team. Really appreciate it. If you don't mind, let's give it up to them. Thank you.
Thank you. I too want to thank you for coming to Greenwich, and I want to thank Congressman Himes for putting this together. It's very helpful, as Jim said. You know, we talked about when we walked through the streets of Pemberwick, we talked about people are going to be angry, and they've heard since the 1950s that they're going to be working on it. It's going to be a hit fix, and this is 2021. So until it gets done, I don't blame you for not believing it. But as Jim said, we've gotten farther with this than we have in the past, and we're going to be on it from both the federal perspective on the river and on the town side. And Jim is, we're working on this every single day. We meet weekly, and certainly, and thank you to Amy too and Pat Sesto and everybody else for weighing in. But Jim?
Just thanks everybody for coming out. It's really appreciative that you do show up for these meetings, because it helps us understand what your concerns are, so that when we have future meetings, we can make sure we're addressing what your concerns are. So thank you so much for that. Also, We have sign-in sheets. I saw a lot of people signing in when they came in. If you want to be kept abreast of future stuff going on with this area, make sure you're signed in there. Make sure you put your emails down. We'll make sure you get out there in that information. So, and then the presentation, we do have a Byram River website on the town's website that links to the Corps' website. We'll be making sure that this presentation also gets put up there as well. So.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks again. Merry Christmas, everybody. Drive safely. We'll see you around.